Person studies abroad, they learn not only in the classroom. The education they gain by living in another culture can have an even larger impact on their lives and work. Looking at international medical education. The doctors are on call tonight. Funding for On Call is provided in part by
Avera is a proud sponsor of On Call on South Dakota Public Broadcasting.
And by the South Dakota Foundation for Medical Care, the Medicare Quality Improvement Organization for South Dakota. Additional funding provided by Dakota Care, Regional Health, the Brookings Health System, Dr. Mark Bubak with Dakota Allergy and Asthma, the South Dakota American College of Physicians, and Swiftel Communications. Closed captioning for On Call is provided by the generous support of Avera, the Brookings Health System, and Fishback Financial Corporation.
I am one South Dakotan who began my learning quest first in this state with undergrad and then 2 years in medical school. I then traveled to the state of Georgia to finish my training. There I lived and practiced what I was taught for a while before I returned to South Dakota. While I was in Atlanta, I had the honor and pleasure to learn from many teachers, but none quite like Ken Walker. He's one of those extraordinary teachers that not only continually spewed forth with vast medical knowledge, making the wonderful workings of the human body understandable, but also he was one of those who expected the most from us, challenging his students to rise to what I often thought were almost impossible heights. It was Dr. Walker who convinced me to choose internal medicine as my field of practice, and Dr. Walker who hired me to be on the faculty at Emory University School of Medicine after my residency. And it is Dr. Walker who is the mentor to very many, just like me, as he continues to challenge us, expecting almost impossible heights. Now Ken has been involved in bringing medical education, nursing training, and more to the country of Georgia, the one on the Black Sea north of Turkey. This adventure in sharing medical knowledge with a country in need has brought him to South Dakota to share the story, to give the keynote address at our School of Pharmacy, and then to be on this show to share the adventure. Also joining us tonight is Dr. Archil Undilashvili. Dr. Undilashvili graduated from Tbilisi State Medical University with a doctorate of medicine degree in 2004. He received his master's degree in public health from Emory University in 2006, his Master of Business Administration and Master of Health Administration degrees from the Georgia State University in 2008. He will complete his administrative residency in health administration. Well, he completed it in 2009. A native of the country of Georgia, Dr. Undilashvili has been the Director of Research Programs at Emory University since 2007. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you, Rick.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, Archil, tell us, did Ken Walker bring you, was he instrumental in dragging you all the way over here to Georgia and the U.S., or were you coming anyway?
No, actually I wouldn't be coming if not Dr. Walker. I met Dr. Walker in 2002, and that was the time when I didn't speak any English.
Oh, really?
So I had this opportunity to come to Emory University on a fellowship from Fogarty Institute of Health, and I didn't know English. So Dr. Walker was kind enough to encourage me so much that in a month I knew enough English to come and study in the Kaplan School of Languages, and he actually made my way through this college so I could go to the public health school.
So you're an MD, and then you've got this public health and this business administration, and now you're leading research. You're the organizer of research at Emory.
I'm organizer of international healthcare programs, and my research is mostly oriented in the healthcare systems. And what we do is we go to the different countries, analyze the healthcare system, find the needs, and then we work with those stakeholders in the country to put in place different programs that helps the country and the population, first of all.
So what other countries are you working with right now?
We have been involved with, other than Georgia, we have been involved with Bangladesh and Ukraine.
So, and what you're doing is you're giving them the structure, the business structure, the economic structure to do the medical.
Yeah, we are giving them the structure for different programs, for the healthcare programs. We are mostly working with the education, and then we are working with the healthcare systems, like the Ministry of Health in Georgia case, for example, to identify the needs, and if it's education or if it's service development, or like in a particular case, I was not on board back then yet, but Emory University helped country of Georgia to develop first public health department, state service for the country.
Right. And Ken, so Archil is one more of your children.
Well, let me enlarge a bit upon how I got to know him. In the summer of 2002, I sent over several medical students to Tbilisi. One of them was a very beautiful young girl. And when I went over there, I noticed that there was this handsome young Georgian who was always driving the medical students various places. One evening, we went to a dance. And Georgians have a stupendous method of dancing. And perhaps Archil might say a bit more about that. But he put on a show that night that was just incredible. And I decided that I should get to know him. And at that time, he knew no English. And so we had more or less to communicate by sign and body language.
Because at that time you didn't know Georgian.
I didn't know Georgian.
Yeah.
But his dancing was stunning. Do you want to make some comments about Georgian
Could we
dances?
see some dancing, or probably not?
Maybe next time.
Okay, next time.
And what about this? Where does Georgian dancing that all young Georgians practice and perform to perfection?
Well, Georgian dancing, our folk dancing is very popular, and it's like every child has to go and learn at least the basics, if not become the professional dancer. And I think, and many people believe, that it's really beautiful. And the interesting fact is that for every region we have in Georgia, we have a particular dance with the particular dress, and it's very beautiful. It involves men and women, and describes different scenes from the life, love, maybe war, like home country defense, and it's a variety and really beautiful.
So it's a folk.
It's a folk dance, yes.
Yeah. So that you met him, you said got to get to know him a little bit better, and you realized you had somebody here, something more than just a dancer, actually.
Yes, and he started to learn English. He told me later that there was no electricity in the building where he lived, and this was a very bad time in Georgia. And he would sit up there almost virtually by candlelight or by lamplight at night studying English.
In a book.
In a book.
Yeah.
A modern Abraham Lincoln, but from Georgia.
Yeah. So let's hear a little bit more about you, though. You from Georgia. You were a farm kid, huh?
I had to get up at 4 a.m. every morning and go out and milk 10 cows.
Yeah, I've heard that story. I can't tell you how many times I've heard that story. Mm-hmm. But you eventually got your way through to college and medical school where?
I went to Emory University, and I basically stayed at Emory since I first went there in 1952, except for 2 years in the Air Force in Vietnam.
So you have a Vietnam experience as well?
Yes.
So then you came back and you were, how did you and J. Willis Hurst, the famous cardiologist, connect? Or was that a connection that happened happenstance?
Well, it's impossible to be around Dr. Hurst and not connect with him. was one of those people who, when he talked to you, stood within 2 inches of your face, just violating your own personal space incredibly. And I got to know him as a student, and then later I was his house officer and chief resident faculty member.
And so to get back to health issues, really what one of the things that we're talking about is education of medicine and of nursing too, because these are the things that you have led the charge, the two of you, to bring that to this country and to other countries. But how long have you been teaching medical students and residents, would you say then?
Started in the mid-'60s.
And you're still doing
50-odd years.
Yeah.
Yes.
So you're still teaching. Mm-hmm. And you've taken this extra job of leadership. So how did you get started with this whole thing?
Well, let me go back to your remark about teaching. The older and more experienced I have grown, I have decided that there's no such word as teaching. The word is learning. And that puts the burden exactly where it should be, on the shoulders of the learner.
Of the learner?
Of the student.
Yes. And so, as a learnee, a person who provides learning to the person who should be learning, what would you call that person then?
Well, I don't provide learning. I just goad them into learning themselves.
Okay, so true. I would say that you are a goader. Maybe we'll call you that from now on. So let's talk about this experience of the Emory, Georgia connection with the country of Georgia connection. How did it get started?
One afternoon, August 1992, I was sitting in my office and the dean of the medical school called me. And it turned out that I was the 7th person he had called. And he said, how about going to Tbilisi for me next week? And I said, sure. Where is Tbilisi?
So the question then I would have is, you said, okay, and you went. This was 92?
August 92. No. We flew from Atlanta to Moscow. And then we stayed in Moscow for about 6 hours layover and went down to the airport. And there was this plane that had 300 seats. And there were 315 of us who got on, and plus 5 dogs and a few cats and pigs and chickens. There were no seat belts.
Yes. So you subsequently flew into Tbilisi.
We got at Tbilisi at 3 a.m. in the morning, and there was immediately a Georgian dinner for us, complete with wine, vodka, and many speeches.
And that's probably a tradition of Georgia, the many speeches.
A tradition.
So, and that all began because there's this Georgia connection. The name obviously brought somebody to invite Emory to be part of this.
What I say is Georgia to Georgia onomatopoeia.
Oh yeah. So the next question I would have would be to tell me about the condition of Georgia, the country, when you arrived.
We found there was intermittent electricity, maybe an hour or two a day. In the wintertime, went back in December, it was just brutally cold. All the buildings are of cement blocks, and your feet got so cold it was incredible. The X-ray department had no films. When parents brought their kiddies to the hospital, they had to bring a stove to keep the room heated. They had to bring blankets. They had to bring food. They had to bring the medications. And perhaps Archil, who was very much present during that time, might want to elaborate on the state of Georgia in 1992.
Well, 1992 was right after the breakup of the Soviet Union, and those times were really hard for Georgians, and I'm sure for most, if not all, for most of the Soviet Union, former Soviet Union countries. Healthcare, I will talk about the healthcare system. During the Soviet Union time, everything was centralized, and healthcare as well, so nobody had to worry about correctly managing hospital, correctly managing inventory, worrying about the payroll. Everything was flown from Moscow, from the central government, from central budget, and no problems at all. Suddenly in '91, all of this was gone, and we appeared in the situation we had no resources, no experience in managing the healthcare or making it private, and suddenly we appeared, all of this was gone. Infrastructure was totally destroyed to support the healthcare. Budget of the country was in jeopardy. So we appeared in the situation that nobody could support the hospitals or healthcare by itself. There were no salaries, there was no electricity in the country, and that was true in the hospitals too. A really bad situation.
You know what, I want to hear the rest of the story. Want to take a switch in attention, but we'll get back to the transition that occurred in a minute. Being adaptable is one of many important traits that a health professional needs if they are to be successful when they are educated and then practice medicine in a foreign country. The ultimate goal is to be able to apply the knowledge you gain in one country in the other as well.
I went to medical school in Nairobi, Kenya. That's the University of Nairobi in Kenya. That's Africa. So I was born and grew up in Nairobi, Kenya. When I finished my medical school, I decided I wanted to do some training in internal medicine. First, I worked in an intensive care unit, and there I got a lot of exposure to internal medicine and critical care. And at that point, I was, you know, in Kenya, typically after your medical school, you might work 2 or 3 years before deciding what specialty to go into, the equivalent of residency. So you'll do a 1-year internship, which I did, and then I worked for a few years. When I decided I wanted to do internal medicine, I decided I'd like to do it in the United States to get that international exposure, to learn medicine in a different setting than what I had practiced in. Close to 5 years is the length of time I've been practicing here in Brookings. I came here in 2007, around August 2007. After that, I came here after my training in Sioux Falls. That's where I did my residency in internal medicine. Yes, there are differences. The biggest differences is resources. Here, the resources are widely available, a lot of resources here. In Nairobi or in Kenya, I would say there are two worlds, in the sense that there's people who are in the rural areas or poorer, may not have access to a lot of things here which are easily available, such as, say, an MRI scan or a CT scan is not widely available. So, and also some expensive medications may not be available. And, but yet, if you practice in Nairobi in the private sector, that is private hospitals or seeing private patients, they'll have access to all those things. So that part of practicing in Kenya is pretty similar to here. But majority of people don't have access to that. And I happen to work in both sorts of areas. Pretty similar. The main differences, of course, is you know, the training in Kenya would have more emphasis on disease conditions which are more prevalent there, such as certain types of infectious diseases, tropical medicine that's emphasized more. That's one of the differences. The other differences is that you know, the training system is kind of patterned after the British system. There's a British system of training, and the Kenyan system originally was developed based on that and then tailored towards the needs of Kenya. And that's what you find in several parts of the world, where there's like an American system of training and a British system of training. But The human body is the same, the differences are not that major. I would say so. The only thing, like I said, is if you're going to practice in a certain area, you need to learn a little more about what is more common there. For example, before I came here, I had to do a lot of studying and sit a lot of exams before I even started the residency program. And then when I started the residency program, I got to learn a lot more about things which are more common here. And so you find if you're going to practice in a certain place, you need to figure out what are the main issues in that area.
Thank you, Eric, for that. It's interesting, the challenges of moving from one country to another. I mean, the things that you have to learn when you come into a different country. Was that a challenge to you, Archil? I mean, the huge difference in Georgia and Georgia.
Fortunately to me, I had a good transformation because I was familiar with the United States system, education system, as well as healthcare system in some way because of my work with the National AIDS Institute of Georgia, which was one of the highest standard healthcare facility for that time, with a close connection with the NIH, Emory University, New York University, and many of my co-workers and friends have gone to study in United States.
So the transition was not that hard for you, actually?
Transition at that time, I came in 2004, and transition for that time was not that hard for me.
Now, the interesting thing that you were talking about earlier was the transition that your country was going through after the Russians were kicked out, or you guys split.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit more about that.
The involvement of initiative from United States government and Emory University's appearance in Georgia was actually right on time. We came out of the system that didn't need the healthcare finance or economics knowledge. We didn't have anybody who knew this subject, almost. I mean, modern health economics that is based on the market economy, that's based on the private healthcare. And we came out and we were out of the centralized, managed healthcare, and we were on our own, with no system, no knowledge on place. So we had to create. So this was just on time that United States came in the country in '92, and Emory University got involved very deep with our healthcare ministry actually, and made majority of most important reforms for that time, like moving this healthcare to the private sector, to be more private sector. Dr. Walker can, I'm sure, talk more about that because he was direct participant of that change at that time, and he was the one who introduced actually different specialties and different subjects and brought people from Emory University, Georgia State University, other U.S. Institutions to help our country's healthcare.
I'm curious to think about, I mean, the motivation that Emory had was just pure do the right thing.
We were approached by the U.S. State Department and asked if we would help the healthcare sector of the country of Georgia. And this was actually a State Department program that was called the Hospital Partnership Program, that ultimately involved 73 different institutions in the former Soviet Union. And I was actually sent to Georgia to pick one hospital for us to relate to. But when I got there and I saw that we needed to relate to the country, not to one hospital. And so that's how we got involved in virtually every phase of healthcare.
Well, and there's not only the doctors and the nurses and the hospital administrators, but it's all of the structure underneath it that goes along.
Right. I started out actually with students and brought students over to Emory for 6 months at a time. Then I got deeply involved in the inadequacy of the hospitals. It's virtually impossible for anybody in the U.S. to understand how abysmal hospitals in all developing countries are. They have no technology, concepts such as patient education are completely unknown. Modern diagnosis is unknown. And it's basically a matter of starting from the beginning.
Yeah. So I'm sure you just, your mouth dropped and then you came back with ideas of what you could do. What were the major thrust of that first?
Well, the first thing that was so apparent is that they had no knowledge of modern medical science.
The med students, I mean the doctors.
Nobody. They had no access to the internet, no access to Western journals and books, only to Russian books and journals that were worthless when they were first printed.
Yeah.
And I walked into the National Library of Medicine for the country of Georgia, and there were these thousands of books and journals just stacked on the stairwells, on tables, on the floors, and worthless in the first place. And so the first thing we did was to set up what we call the National Information Learning Center. And we put about 20 computers in, and we gave classes in how to access medical databases on the internet. And so providing information, we discovered that the Georgian physicians and nurses are very bright and well trained in basics, and what they needed was the information. And so by providing that, it made an exponential improvement in their health care.
Now, the fact that you're on the board of the National Library of Medicine, which is a separate deal from Emory, it's just one of those things that did that make that connection help you with that exact issue that you're talking about?
Well, when I grew up as a little kid on the farm, my town, which is about a third the size of Brookings, had a very famous library. And every weekend I would have one day to go there and I'd check out 12 books, which was the limit, and read them during the rest of the week. And I became entranced with the concept of libraries. And so later on I got deeply involved, as you said, with the National Library of Medicine. This is one of the great institutions of the world. It is the leader in medical informatics. It's also the leader in outreach activities. It has extensive outreach activities to American Indians, to the natives in Hawaii, to the Eskimos. It deals with pharmacists and provides information the pharmacists can give to patients. And so the concept of providing information was deeply ingrained in my marrow.
Yeah, and so that happened.
Yes.
And has that expanded? I mean, right now, how connected are they? I mean, I suppose internet connected, and you feel pretty good about the connection.
They have outstanding connections, and information is no longer even a thought.
Right. So, Archil, tell us a little bit about the state now. Do we have? I know that there was a bunch of med schools at one time. Has there been a unification of med schools and med students? And I mean, what's happened with the medical education?
Well, with the new system and reforms in the education system, most of the highest education institutions that were established during this period of 92 through 2000 have actually been gone because they could not meet the certain criteria that Health Ministry together with Education Ministry established for them. So right now we only have about 5 major institutions. Out of them, 3 are public, state-owned, and 2 private.
Instead of the 40 that they had at one time.
Maybe 70.
70. So I bet it was just, there was no standardization. It was just a med school on every corner.
Yeah, unfortunately in early 90s there were a lot of education institutions established as a way to support the families for those who, it's kind of business.
So what kind of health, what's the status of the health of the Georgians now? Are they really up to the standard? I mean, are they receiving, I mean, what's the health there? Is there problems with illnesses there that we don't have here, or where is their condition, you know, the general Georgian?
I won't say that there are some special illnesses that are not
being addressed.
Right now, the access to the healthcare for Georgians more or less is pretty good. Again, with the reforms that have been put in place mostly since 2003, healthcare has been mostly privatized. The payment system has been mostly moved to the insurance sector, and
so they have insurance-based healthcare financing.
Yes. Yes.
And is the insurance accessible to everyone?
It is not accessible to everyone, but most of the employers provide now employment-based insurance. And then there are the groups like vulnerable or below the poverty line that state provides the state insurance for them.
Okay.
But obviously there still is a portion of the population that has no insurance and has to make out-of-pocket payments for the health care.
Can your perspective of that kind of healthcare financing?
The healthcare insurance industry has done, as Archil indicated, quite well within limits. The amount of money that's available for insurance is not nearly enough. In addition, there are fairly large segments of the population that are not covered, mostly farmers and people in rural areas, and this is a big problem.
All right. We'll get back to that topic in a minute. The breadth of learning one receives when they are educated in multiple countries and cultures can be extremely valuable. It can become priceless when they can help teach others from their history of experience.
I come from Uruguay, Montevideo, Uruguay. That's in South America. And that's where I was born and I was raised until we came here. I went to the Universidad de la República in Uruguay. It's actually a state university. And when I did my medical school, we didn't have any private universities yet. Now there is 2 private universities. I did my residency, 4 years residency in obstetrics and gynecology. So I graduated in '84 with a medical degree, and then I did a residency program in OBGYN. So in Uruguay, okay. Yeah, those were all in Uruguay. And I did a master's in public health at the University of Minnesota, School of Public Health. We went back to Uruguay and we were working for a few years there. And I worked as an associate professor at the OBGYN department in our medical school, and also as a public health person with the Pan American Health Organization. There is a small center. And now we came in 2001 with my husband and my 2 kids, and I have been teaching at the College of Nursing and Health Sciences for 11 years now. We came in 2001. I teach public health sciences in general. I teach community health for undergraduate students who are involved in a major that is related to health sciences in general. And then I teach advanced community health assessment at the College of Nursing with 5th semester undergraduate students. Well, I think that the main differences, especially when I did my medical school, was that we mostly work with real patients. We studied at the hospital, and our training was always with real patients who were at the hospital or in outpatient clinics with real patients. We didn't use as much simulation as they do here. Otherwise, it is the same long, really busy training, and many years. I think it took me 9 years to finish medical school, so it's a long career. If you go to the university hospital, you will have the technology there. You might not have a fancy place or all the amenities or a nicer place to stay, but actually professors and academics who are the best and experts are actually teaching at the university hospitals and state hospitals, and there is where medical students train.
Thank you, Cristina, for that beautiful story. Let's talk about the value of not only practicing but teaching international students when you're in Tbilisi or when we have international students here. Ken, what's your international student comment?
Well, the other cultures, as you know, are quite different from the ones we're accustomed to. And I'm sure when you came to the state of Georgia from the state of South Dakota, yeah, you discovered you entered a vastly different culture.
True. Very different.
One of the big differences over in the country of Georgia is that students finish high school and immediately go to medical school. Unlike the U.S., where it's 4 years of college and 4 years of medical school. And so the students are younger and perhaps more impressionable and perhaps easier to teach. The language is a big problem. We initially brought about 100 students over a period of a few years to the U.S., and I had to continually remind the faculty and the interns and residents that whenever they told one of the students something, they immediately had, like, check that blood culture on the patient, that they immediately had to say, now tell me what I just told you.
Oh, to repeat it back, because for sure they may not have understood.
To make sure that they understood. But this kind of problem has largely vanished. The current president of Georgia, President Saakashvili, has brought in 1,000 English teachers from the U.S. and put all in rural areas to teach English.
Wow.
And English has become the second language of virtually all the citizens of Georgia. And so language has stopped being a problem. There are cultural problems that one needs to be aware of. For example, in Georgia, as in many other countries, when a family brings their mother or father to you and they tell you, now, if mama has cancer, do not tell her. She doesn't want to hear it, and we don't want her to hear it, and you deal with us. And of course, that's so vastly different from here in the U.S., where
we need to get permission from the patient to tell the family.
Right, where the party line is to tell the patient everything.
How do you feel about that particular issue, may I ask?
Well, there are a number of things like that. For example, whether you call a patient by their first name or not. And there's some patients who want you to call them by the first name, there's some who don't. And so you need to find out ahead of time how the patient and their family feel about sensitive issues and follow their wishes.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sure there's a variety of different ways and to take as you interact with people in a different culture.
It's so very different. When I first went over there, I had to learn that every meeting I had to have a shot of vodka. I even would start out meetings at 7 a.m. with a shot of vodka. And it took some while. It's very different from the moonshine of Wilkes County and Washington, Georgia, here in the U.S.
Yeah. I can't remember a shot of vodka at 7 in the morning, to be honest with you, for many years anyway. So any comment to match what Ken said, Archil?
Well, obviously it's whether or not it's Georgian or American going to a different country, there's a period that for adaptation that may be a little difficult for one or for the other, but
how do you see Georgian, the U.S. people different? I mean, he just told us some of the things that we have to do, and we talk with people who are from the country of Georgia, what sticks in your mind about how it's different to talk to people from this country?
I don't really think I discovered something really different or unusual or strange. I think American people are very open, easy to interact with, easy to deal with, warm, and that may be one of the reasons Georgians really love to come to study or visit or just to be friends with the Americans.
So I like to hear the fact that you see us as warm. That's
yeah,
good.
we familiarize best with Americans than any other people, actually.
The Georgians have a tradition that is hundreds, maybe even thousands of years old, called the Georgian table. And that's one of the most notable things to people who go there. And perhaps you might want to say something about the Georgian table.
Yeah, I knew he was going to go there.
So what's the Georgian table, Archil?
Let me start with this. Usually when Dr. Walker starts talking about Georgia, he starts with the fact that the first human being outside of Africa was discovered in Georgia, the place called Dmanisi, and that was 1.75 million years ago. And National Geographic has a big article, and it's a cover story for them in one of their issues. And the second thing he will tell is that the first known winemaking in the history dates 6,000 BC in Georgia. So every time if I have to get and talk after him, I will say that it really feels good that I'm representing the oldest nation who is also an oldest drinker.
Yes, the winemakers of the world.
Yeah.
And you still make wine there?
We still make
good
wine. Good wine. Well, we are considered the wine country. Our main product of our agriculture is wine, and the table and the supra, this traditional dinner table that Dr. Walker was referring to, it's sort of an entertainment for the participants, which includes food and alcohol, obviously, with the tamada, who is a toastmaster, the main person who leads the supra with the toasts, and actually he is the director of the supra, and the kind of time the participants will have is totally depending on this toastmaster or tamada person.
To make a good supper.
He's the boss of the table.
Yes.
There's a boss.
He is a boss elected boss.
Oh.
So he is elected from the members by the majority, like he's named. But the Georgian table is interesting because of its toasts, which has some kind of chronology. There are some toasts that are necessarily to be said on Georgian table. And then obviously it will include, if it's a happy table, it will include dancing, singing, poetry, and just beautiful stories.
So it's a tradition of your country that's very interesting, along with its dancing.
Yes.
And the toast begins with a toast to God, a toast to this family, a toast to the country. And it's very rigorous in its structure. And then as the wine flows, it becomes less structured.
It opens up. I was wondering about the leadership, the government of Georgia at this point. Do you feel comfortable with that leadership, and has it been supportive of this?
Well, let me begin by illustrating what happened to me in 1998, I think. On Christmas Eve, some people drove up to my house and virtually delivered a young Georgian to my door who was quite ill. He was about 26 years old. He had been addicted to cocaine, and which was common in the 90s in Georgia in young people. And he came here determined to get rid of cocaine, his habit. And so the way he did that was to go cold turkey and leave Georgia on a plane. And so I saw to it that he was well taken care of.
I mean, he arrived in Atlanta.
Right. And so then a couple of weeks later, I went to Georgia. And as I came off the plane, I was met by 6 people in Army fatigues with Kalashnikov machine guns who escorted me to a Mercedes, and they said, "This will be your car and driver whenever you're in Georgia." And it turned out that this young man had been the right hand of the mafia, so to speak, leader of Georgia. And since I had taken care of him, he was going to take care of me every time I was in Georgia. Now, fast forward to 2004, there was the Rose Revolution, and a remarkable change in the country. It is politically quite stable. The President Saakashvili, has brought about huge reforms. Do you want to talk some more about that?
Well, there was transition was so sudden that it was very hard for us to realize where we came from and where we got in 2003. Actually, we could not leave our car parked outside. And after these new reforms, when these young Western educated people came into the power, everything suddenly changed. It is now the safest, and it's a place in the world, maybe one of the safest places. And economically, we are thriving. We haven't had any sort of, like, we forgot whether or not we can really not have an electricity or gas supply suddenly.
So now you've got it. It's always there.
So it's always there.
The Rose Revolution, though, was when the mafia was cleaned up.
Vanished.
Yes.
What did they do? They were asked to leave?
They were put in jail.
Yes. They were put in jail. They fled the country. And just the rule of law was established.
So,
in fact, there was a statistic in the newspapers a few weeks ago that Georgia has less crime and thievery than Scandinavia,
which is
the best in the world.
Wow, and that's because of the present leader.
Of the present leader.
And so he's very supportive of what you're doing in medicine.
Yes, in fact, we have a nursing training school, and the president's wife is a nurse, and she has taken our course, and they're extremely supportive of everything that we have done to help the country.
Not only that, to develop our programs, actually, government gave us the building for a symbolic price, so we could establish the modern healthcare learning center, experiential learning center for the Georgian professionals and students.
So, so the modern state of Georgia, though, is not perfect yet. I understand the maternal health issues. There's some significant issues. There's some things about AIDS and tuberculosis maybe we could talk about. They've got some room to grow in improving healthcare there.
Oh yeah, there are many opportunities.
And so where do you see Emory going next?
Well, the model that our Georgian colleagues and we have developed, we think can be widely applied to all developing countries. And so we're in the process now of making proposals to donor organizations to do exactly that.
The few of the projects from many that Emory University, we have been working with our Georgian colleagues and that we established and executed in Georgia. I would count 3 of the most significant ones, and that would be the establishment of the emergency care in the country, which was non-existent in the Soviet Union states. It was totally different system based on an admission rooms, no emergency department, no emergency physician. So we were the ones who established first emergency room with Lipschice Central University Hospital and first emergency training program. Actually, Emory University faculty was full-time involved for 2 years to develop the fellowship, mini residency as we call it, so we could take the Georgian professionals and make them emergency physicians. And the second was to take the nursing and work with them to make them up to, like, to train them so they could meet the standard as much as possible, to upgrade their skills, to make nursing respected profession, which unfortunately hasn't been since the Soviet Union time, and establishing the training center for the nurses.
So this is a fabulous story of wonderful transition in your country, and a lot of it's due to people from the U.S. part of Georgia, too.
Georgia to Georgia.
That's fabulous. We'll take a break in just a second. Recently, National Geographic had an article addressing the mystery of prehistoric human migration. Paleontologists have been able to trace the journey by using mitochondrial DNA for the mother-to-daughter lineage and the Y gene for the father-to-son lineage. The magazine illustrated how 40 to 50,000 years ago, starting in Africa, early humans spread out very gradually up through the Middle Eastern countries, turning west into Europe and then turning east across Asia and over the Bering Strait to the Americas. What is so amazing to me is how scientists tie humanity together genetically by a common ancestor in Africa, and how our genes are all so incredibly similar. Indeed, we are so very much like our great-grandparents of 40 to 50,000 years ago that one should proclaim all humans alive today truly are cousins, and certainly family. And yet, over time, we have become separated, not only by geography, language, and cultural barriers, but also by differences in education and economics. In many distant countries, members of the family of humanity struggle with terrible poverty, isolation, inadequate education, and political chaos. Add to this out-of-control tuberculosis, AIDS, and waterborne illnesses, especially affecting the very young. Solutions for struggling countries could come with adequate education. Training people in medicine and nursing could provide for structure to give appropriate prenatal, hospital, and outpatient care. Sharing education in community organization could give needed emergency services, disaster relief, proper water management, and modern medical care. Planting knowledge could grow stability out of disorder. Some would say the U.S. is viewed by the rest of the world, especially those living in the Middle East, as a big bully, intent on pushing our customs and our way of thinking down everyone's throat. Many believe our emphasis has been more with military and political control rather than community education and understanding. This is not to say chaos should be left to run without rules and control, but I submit the true enemy is ignorance, theirs and ours. I believe we could fare better in the eyes of our neighbors if we could provide more humanitarian good by sharing our resources of education, especially in medicine and nursing. And then we could get to know our neighbor, too. We could do better for our cousins in need. So how do you see international education's role in helping bring disparate people and cultures together?
Actually, I think that medicine is probably the preeminent way in which one can help the world and bring people together. The medical problems of the world are quite similar, and the way of tackling them is very similar. We in the West have had the privilege of accumulating a huge amount of information and skills that is very much aimed at alleviating human suffering and disease. And I think it's our obligation and our privilege and pleasure to give what we have to the rest of the world.
Fabulous words, beautiful words. Archil, 5 seconds.
I think it's very important to get the information and knowledge shared, especially from those who have gotten more advanced than we are in current. And I'm not talking about my country, I'm talking personally about me. It was a great asset for me to receive what I received from my American teachers, American colleagues, classmates, that I could take and share with my own peers and fellows, not only in my country but in other places as well.
Well, I want to thank the two of you for joining us and sharing this wonderful, important message. And, we'll have you back again in South Dakota. That closes the book for our show on international medical education. I sincerely thank our studio guest for visiting with us about this very important topic. Dr. Archil Undilashvili, Director of Research Programs at Emory University, and my mentor and good friend, Dr. Ken Walker from the Emory School of Medicine. So, as Irish poet William Butler Yeats illuminated, education is not the filling of a pail, but the lighting of a fire. Until next time, stay healthy out there, people.
Funding for On Call is provided in part by
Avera is a proud sponsor of On Call on South Dakota Public Broadcasting.
and by the South Dakota Foundation for Medical Care, the Medicare Quality Improvement Organization for South Dakota. Additional funding provided by Dakota Care, Regional Health, the Brookings Health System, Dr. Mark Bubak with Dakota Allergy and Asthma, the South Dakota American College of Physicians, and Swiftel Communications. Closed captioning for On Call is provided by the generous support of Avera, the Brookings Health System, and Fishback Financial Corporation.